of programming, in the industry, what I have done, and I'm just giving you guys an introduction to the biostatistical world. Okay, so I'll talk about, just an introduction about myself. So currently, I am working for a GlaxoSmithKline, GSK. I'm an associate director there. I am a asset lead of programming. So I have a compound where I am responsible for taking care of that compound from a programming perspective. I have a pretty large team, that do programming for us. Okay, mainly right now we're doing SAS programming, but more and more GSK is starting to focus on R programming, and therefore I'm here. I have recently started to learn SAS, R, maybe about a year ago, and our company has actually started to produce data sets and tables, listings, figures using R. So R is definitely a growing field in this industry. It has been dominated by SAS over the last 20, 30 years, but gradually the industry does seem to be shifting towards R at this time. Okay. So that's me in a nutshell. So what is a clinical trial, right? Clinical trial is essentially a trial that you give medicine to people to see whether it is safe and efficacious. So safety and efficacy are the two major focuses of a clinical trial, right? So you have a new idea, a new drug that you want to test, and you see if it's better or at least equivalent to what we have, right? And is it safe? Those are the two big questions, right? Does it work and is it safe? Those are the two big questions that we try to answer using a clinical trial, right? Typically, the way it starts is you start with a phase 1 study, which is a small study. Actually, even before phase 1, of course, they do testing on animals, typically mice, to see how the drug affects mice, right? Once they think, okay, it seems fairly safe for humans, then they'll start testing, doing a phase 1 study using a few human beings, right? And there's a lot of what they call PK data that's involved. So pharmacokinetics, how long does it take the drug to exit the body, right? What dose seems to be tolerable for the patient? What dose seems to be safe, tolerable, and also does it kind of work? But really, at this point, you want to see if it's safe and what dose is safe, right? Is it 50 milligrams every day, or is it 100 milligrams every day or something? Whatever it is, you're trying to figure all that out. Okay. And then from there you go to phase 2, which is a test on larger group of elected individuals. This one, now you're starting to look at efficacy. Here you're more about safety and dosage, right? Side effects. Here now you're starting to think, okay, it's a larger group. Do I have a good sense of whether this thing actually works, right? And then if those two phases go well, then you do a big trial. The phase 3 is the big one, okay, where you could have hundreds of patients. Sometimes I've seen some studies have thousands of patients, right? So try to get a wide demographic. I work on trials that are global. There's this same trial is happening in Europe, in the United States, Canada, Korea, India, all sorts of places. Okay, so this is of course testing for long-term effectiveness and comparison with other medications, right? And then from there, if things go well there, then you apply for FDA approval. FDA is the Food and Drug Agency in the United States of America. There's other agencies, of course, around the world. Japan has the PMDA. Europe has the EUMAA, European Union. So, there's different regulatory agencies in different parts of the world that need to approve, right? And then if they approve, then we have a phase 4 after market. After it goes to market, we continue to test for effectiveness and safety, right? And if you know, maybe everything went well up to phase 3, but then we find out when it actually enters the market that something's wrong, right? And you know, you can even take the drug off the market if things don't go well after market. Okay. You know, this can happen because, you know, this is a very controlled environment, this phase 1, 2, 3, right? So everything goes well, but it's happening in a very controlled environment. Whereas phase 4, it's out in the market, so anybody can use it, and you know, the real world, and that's why these days they have a lot of research surrounding real world data, and implementation science is a big buzzword these days. So there's a lot of implementation science studies that talk about how to implement so that it'll actually work in the real world. Because what we have started to realize, what the industry has started to realize, is that even if it goes well phase 1, 2, and 3, it doesn't always go well in phase 4. Okay? So that's something you should know. So this is a fantastic field. You know, medicines are being tested left and right. It's a huge industry, right? There's tremendous opportunity for you guys to enter this industry because there's no shortage. You know, there's a shortage of good R and SAS programmers. There's, you know, I know myself, I hired 3 programmers just within the last few months, right, in the United States and UK. But eventually, Nepal is going to be a very big market, I believe. You'll have a lot of very highly qualified R and SAS programmers working in this industry within the next, you know, few years. Okay. So the importance of clinical trials cannot be understated, right? I mean, imagine in the old days, before you had clinical trials, you know, you took a drug, people, you know, these snake oil salesmen, right? They just go out, convince people, oh, this is a great medicine, it'll make your life much better. And then you take it, it either does nothing for you or even makes your situation worse, sometimes even leading to death, right? In the old days, nothing was regulated. Everything, anybody could sell anything, right? Now it's a much more regulated industry, very highly regulated. The FDA and other agencies around the world, they want to see, did you test the drug properly before they'll approve it, right? So they want to see your phase 1 data, phase 2 data, phase 3 data. And so, you know, to make sure that that thing really does what you say it does, okay? So, you know, it's a very important industry that'll only keep getting bigger and bigger, I believe. Okay. The one aspect of this clinical trial industry is that it is very costly. Imagine having to hire doctors, nurses, all the data management people, all the programmers, right, all the statisticians. So it's a very costly industry. So they are trying to figure out ways of making you know, getting a medicine into the market less expensive, but, you know, honestly, it's not that simple, because if you want to do it properly, you need qualified people, and to hire doctors, programmers, nurses, you know, highly qualified data management people, you know, having the right database structure, all that requires money, right? You need to pay your doctors and your programmers and everybody, and they, you know, they demand high salaries, right? So it is an expensive proposition to get a medicine out into the market. Okay, but in the end, you know, once you get these medicines out in the market, people benefit, as you know, 100 years ago versus today. There's so many, the health of people have improved so drastically due to these medicines out there. Right? So how does clinical data trial, what are the steps involved, right? So initially, you need to collect the data, right? So even before you collect the data, obviously there has to be a lot of work figuring out where you're going to collect the data. Are you going to collect the data in India, in China, in the US, in UK? So a lot of, people involved even before this step, obviously. But once you get to this step, okay, so you've got these clinics all around the world with doctors and nurses and data entry people and what they call clinical research associates. all these people start entering this data, right? So you have a thing called a CRF, case report form, right? Which is basically, how you're supposed to enter the data, right? And then, so that all that data is collected. So that's your raw data, okay? From there, once you get your raw data, then you need to map it to a standard way, right? So that's your SDTM data, which is part of this global consortium called CDISC, okay? So that is a organization that focuses on how clinical trial data should be standardized. A simple example, for example, is subject ID, right? A subject ID could be one of 100 different variables, right? One company can call it PT for patient. Another company can call it SUBJID, subject ID. Another company can say SUBJ, unique subject ID. So there's, 100 different ways you can say subject or patient, right? So that's what was happening in the industry for a long time. When I started this industry, CDISC was not, implemented yet. So every company was doing their own way, and it was a mess. So now every company uses CDISC, right, and SDTM standards, right? So now it's a standard way of collecting the data. So one company's AE data will look very similar to another company's AE data, adverse event, AE's adverse event, right? So, you'll have that way the FDA, when they get the data, they don't have to figure out what does this variable mean, because, it's all standardized. Everybody knows what U subject ID means, right? So everybody knows what AESOC means, like system organ class, right? So all those different things. So every variable is very clear. So that's the idea behind standardization and data mapping from raw data to SDTM data. Okay, now you have your raw data in a standardized format, that's SDTM, right? And then what's the next step? The next step is you want to analyze that data to see whether it's safe and whether it's efficacious, right? Safety and efficacy, those are the big two things, right? So now in order to do that, you need to create new variables. You need to add a whole bunch of new variables to add to these data sets and create new data sets that will be used later in the analysis. So you create tables, listings, graphs, all that, right? Efficacy graphs, safety graphs, and tables, listings, right? So this is a big process. So you'll have data sets like ADAE, ADLB, ADSL. All these things will help you to create tables and listing later on. Okay. So these are called ADAM data sets, analysis data set model. Okay. So once you have the ADAM data sets, now you start. And typically, this will be done, with either SAS or R. All of these steps really will be using SAS or R. Okay. In the future, maybe there's scope for Python too. I'm not familiar with Python, but maybe Python could also be used in the industry someday. Okay. And then once you have your tables and listings, then you're getting into statistical modeling part of it, right? You generate complicated tables or simple tables depending on the situation. Efficacy tables tend to be more complicated. Safety tables tend to be more standard. Right? So, and then what happens after that is you need to decide, right? So who are the decision makers, right? Before it even gets to the regulatory agencies, right? We need to internally at GSK, for example, decide whether we want to send this data to the FDA for submission, right? Saying to the FDA, hey, we think this drug works, so we'd like you to approve it, right? But we have to determine that looking at our graphs, tables, listings to see whether the drug truly is safe or not, right? And then once you have that, if you feel like it's working, then you write the medical writers. This is not a programming task, okay? The medical writers, the doctors will come in and start writing clinical study reports, CSR. Okay, and then the CSR is written by these medical people, and then it's sent over. And this CSR is a summary of all your findings that that we programmers send, right? So it's like a document, it's a Word document basically, where they talk about different aspects of the study and how it went and all that. So it's a very big, big report. And then from the report, the FDA reads that report. They even look at our tables, listings, and graphs. They look at our data itself. So we send them the ATOM data sets and SDATM data sets. So they do some programming on their own end, the FDA will, and to see whether we did the programming correctly, right? Whether they can reproduce our results from our raw data to our listings and to our, does it all make sense? Right, so they do a very thorough review. The FDA will come back and say, okay, I am not convinced that this is true. Can you give me 10 more tables? Can you and do it this way? Break it down by race, break it down by gender. They'll have different requests. So the FDA will come back, we'll create more tables for them. And finally, once they are satisfied that everything is, it's safe, it's efficacious, then only they'll approve it. Okay, and that's the cycle. Okay, so this is where we come in. It's a huge task, but this is the key areas where we come in, right? This is just one small part of the drug creation cycle, of course, right? Obviously, before you start collecting data, the chemists out there, all those people, doctors, they need to figure out which compound might work for a certain disease. So that's way before this step, right? Then you have to do all these other things. Okay, so this is where we come in. Okay, so what do? We create analysis data sets from raw data sets, as we just talked about. We create tables, figures, listings, electronic submission packages, right? We call it define.xml. Okay, validate all the generated data sets, programs, and submission packages. Okay, so the way it works is there's always double programming. So let's say you programmed ADSL. Right? Somebody else also needs to program ADSL independently, right? And then you do in SAS what they call a proc compare, right? An electronic proc compare, whether to see the data set that you created matches the data set that the QC programmer, the validator, also came to the same results as you, right? If you don't come to the same results, then you have to figure out. There's a lot of investigation, and it's a fun job for people that are investigating why this data set's not matching. What is the difference between your algorithm and my algorithm, and who is right, who's wrong, right? So it's a very interesting job, actually. I actually miss being a programmer. These days I'm more of a, at that director level, so I don't get to program that much. But it's really a fun job. If you enjoy investigating and programming and algorithms, it's a great fun. I really enjoy being a programmer. I mean, I still am technically, but when I was really doing hands-on programming every day, I truly enjoyed the job. In fact, that was my favorite part of my career, was when I was learning, when I was doing it. That was a lot of fun, actually. Okay, just want to clarify that. Okay, my journey in clinical. Okay, so this is where the slide I was talking about. So I started in 2007 at PPD, which is a global CRO. It's a big CRO company, right? This is really where I learned SAS programming. I was in the marketing industry at Nielsen Media Research. I had done my master's in biostatistics and then got a job as a statistician at Nielsen Media Research, which is more marketing. I was looking at internet penetration rates throughout the world, what percent of the world is using the internet, in Nepal or India or the United States, whatever, and which websites and all those things, right? But then from there, I decided to use my education and then get into the clinical trial industry, right? So I started at PPD as a programmer, and then I moved over. I got promoted and things, and I moved over to Pfizer as an associate director. And now after that 3.5 years of that, I am as a lead associate director at GSK. Okay, so that's my journey. You guys, have a tremendous potential here, right? So, I think there's no reason that Nepal will not be a hub of clinical programmers, already, you've heard of D2 Hawkeye. They have really penetrated the US market, and you know the success stories around there, right? So I don't see why we cannot become a big player in the clinical trial industry. We would, I think you guys would be amongst the first in Nepal to be in this industry, right? So there's plenty of opportunities out there. I know that for sure. Okay. We're always hiring. I know in India, people get a job every 6 months. They switch jobs and double. Like from 3-4 years ago, they probably doubled their salary, right? If they started 3-4 years ago. So I think there's tremendous opportunities. There's also great learning opportunities out there. Okay, so there is this Pharmaverse. If you go to pharmaverse.org, you can see what they're doing using R. Okay, so I am involved with this particular piece of Pharmaverse, which is Admiral, right? I am currently at GSK the Admiral business lead, right? So my goal is to create functions using R that will support Atom datasets. So that's what Admiral is about. These other packages do other aspects of the industry, creating define.xml, for example, right? Doing various different things. They call it an end-to-end utilities, right? So, from the start, from, SDTM mapping to all the way to creating the submission package, right? With the define.xml, all that. So these different things are supporting all of that. This particular piece, which I'm involved with, Admiral, is supporting the creation of Atom data sets. So we have at this point written, hundreds of functions that help to create Atom data sets. We use what we call a modularized approach, which means small little functions. Instead of one big function that does everything, we create small little functions that you put together to create an Atom data set. Okay. And anybody can get involved with Admiral. Okay, so if you're interested in getting involved, if you are already a pretty good R programmer, and you do need some clinical trial industry knowledge. If you are interested, anybody, you are, we welcome anybody to join Admiral and start writing functions in R to create Atom data sets. Okay, so just realize that there's opportunities out there to get involved. Okay. All right, and these are some more resources out there that can help you get started. Okay. So at this point, what was the first question?
So I'm currently working as statistical programmer in Numeric Mind, and I am familiar in some way with clinical trials.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So Ojesh, can you talk to the rest of the team here about what you've done and what you found interesting or difficult or anything you want to say about your experience working at Numeric Mind?
So first of all, this industry was something else and something unique for me as well as many people, and it was hard setting up at first, but yeah, the clinical trials data are very dirty in some cases, and that was one of the hard things that I had to work on.
Mhm.
Other than that, I am still adapting to the trials data, and every day is a new challenge.
Right, right, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the most interesting aspect of our job is you're working with a partner, right? So if you're a production programmer, then you'll have a QC programmer working with you. You both are doing the same thing to see if you guys in the end match on the results. So my advice to you is that be very respectful of each other, right? But what I've experienced in this industry is you have some personality issues, right? Some people say, "Oh, my data set is correct. My program is better than yours. You need to fix it." When in reality, they were wrong, right? The other person was right. So you have to be humble. You have to assume that you made the mistake. If you're not matching, don't always assume the other person made the mistake. Even very good programmers, will make mistakes because this job is so detail oriented. So one thing I will say is this job, don't do it unless you are a detail oriented person that really cares about quality. Okay. There's hundreds of different places where you can make mistakes in your programming. Okay. So to be a good programmer really requires the desire for quality, high quality, and the willingness to work hard so that you try to catch as many issues while you're doing the programming. You know, you really have to do the investigation. What does the data really look like? What am I trying to achieve? When you see a number on a table, what does that number mean, right? You know, in Nepal, sometimes the teachers will just teach you to memorize things where they don't really focus on, and this is not just Nepal, it's throughout the world, right? The teachers just getting you to memorize things, but not really helping the student understand the concept, right? So I strongly would emphasize, you guys focus on understanding why you're doing what you're doing. What does the number on a table actually mean, right? Don't become a robot and just run a proc freak or proc means in SAS and hope the number is right, right? So you need to understand, in detail what those numbers mean and things. It's a challenging industry. It's not for anybody, right? It's an industry that requires some intelligence, some smarts, right? So if you guys can make it as a programmer, statistician in this industry, you'll be highly respected because not everybody can make it. I know so many people that tried to make it in this industry and couldn't because they didn't have the ability. So if you guys believe in yourself, which obviously you should, you need to work hard, right? It's hard, but it's not impossible, right? If you work hard, you'll make it. Okay, that's what I would say. So, you may not get it right away, but you'll get it. And, they'll have resources to help you get there. Yeah. Go ahead.
This is Sunil. Actually, as Aljesh mentioned, even I am working on a data cleaning process, and actually I predominantly work on SAS, not R. So I'm curious to know like how R can be a second tool after SAS, because I think in SAS there are good RDBMS concepts which I think leverage like a lot of we can lessen the lines of code with few SQL statements. So I just want to understand like how R shines in clinical trial. Just because I have not done much of R.
Right. That's a great question. Who was that? Was that Sunil? Or
This is Sunil.
Sunil. Thank you, Sunil, for a great question. Yeah, I mean, Sunil, I like SAS at this point in my career better than R, to be totally honest with you, because I started as a SAS programmer, right? I know SAS very well. I can do anything with SAS. Whereas with R, it's even now it's a struggle for me, right? I'm just learning still, right? And to be honest, the reason I'm still learning is because I don't really do a whole lot of programming myself, so I don't get that opportunity, right? But the reason that R is becoming very popular is because it's open source, like the Admiral package is open source. It's a free software, right? Anybody can download R today on their computers and get going. Whereas with SAS, there's a big cost involved, right? So that's one of the main reasons that the industry is moving towards R. Now, R is known for its efficiency when it comes to especially graphics, right? To create nice graphs, right? For other things, R was not designed specifically to do clinical trials data, right? So what's happening, and that's why we are creating these functions in Admiral and this Pharmaverse and all these ideas so that it will become easier. So we're at the infancy, actually. You guys are at the early birds gets, early bird gets the worm stage. So you guys are at the right time you're entering this R industry in clinical trials. You have a great opportunity. If you become really good R programmers in the clinical trial industry, I guarantee you'll have very high paying jobs for many, many years to come. Because that's where the industry is headed towards. Okay.
Thanks, Ojesh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me, I have another question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was curious to know in the industry, who
Mhm.
does the statistical analysis? Is it someone with a degree in statistics or computer, or someone with a biological science degree can also do statistical analysis? So who is most sought
Excellent.
after?
Excellent question. Okay, excellent question. Actually, this is always debated at GSK and other companies of who should be doing that, right? So we programmers will do, typically the way it works is we will do the programming, right? So even if you have a complicated statistical model, right, the actual programming will be typically done by programmers. But then you need somebody with that true knowledge of the statistics, right? Not all programmers. There's two kinds of programmers out there, right? Programmers with statistical knowledge, like myself. I have a biostats degree, right, in a master's, right? So I have, and I was a statistician in another industry before, so I have a pretty good understanding of statistics, right? But there, you'll also have other programmers in the industry that really don't have much statistical background, right? They don't really have a full understanding of the statistic modeling and more complicated math that's involved, right? But we still allow them to run the different procedures. Like you have your proc mixed, right? Proc mixed, mixed models is a complicated statistical thing, right? Not everybody understands mixed models, right? But to run the code, what will typically happen is the statistician. So every company will have a statistician that will provide the code that you need to run in SAS or R to get the numbers that you need on the table. Okay, and then it is the statistician's job to make sure those numbers are right. Okay, so that's how it works. So you're still allowed to create the table with these complicated numbers in there, but it's not truly expected that you fully understand those numbers. So even if you're not a statistical genius, you don't have to be a stat guru or stat genius to be a really good programmer, because there will be statisticians that have that high level knowledge of the math behind things. Okay, but having said that, all programmers, any decent programmer will have good understanding of basic statistics. You should know what a mean is, right? How do you get a mean? What does mean mean? What is a median? What's the difference between mean and median, right? These are very basic things that all of you guys should know if you want to be in this industry. So basic statistics you need to know. High level statistics you don't really need to know. You'll be provided the code that you need to run in order to generate the number. So great question, Subodh.
Thank you.
So yeah, if you're hesitant to because it says statistical programming, right? But don't hesitate to enter the industry because you're not a stat genius. You don't have to be a stat genius. You just have to be a really good programmer, somebody who can do algorithms, if else statements, merging, looping, proper merges, don't do multiple merges, things like that. I mean, it can be a great challenge. High level programmers in this industry, you will be challenged to do very complex programming. If you prove yourself to be a really good programmer, you will be challenged to create some pretty complicated algorithms, which is, that's what intelligent people want, right? They want to be challenged. They don't want to be adding 2 + 2 all their life, do you? So, yeah, my suggestion for next steps for you is get some data, okay? Get some publicly available data. And start reading, the materials in that slide, start reading some of that stuff and start doing programming. The only way to really learn is, challenge yourself to create ADSL, find some data set out there and say, all right, I'm going to create ADSL or ADAE, start reading the CDISC material out there, having a good understanding of CDISC materials. And I'm sure Binod will be happy to provide you with more resources. He knows a lot about this industry at this point. And, there's already people in this room that I'm sure can help you get started. The key is to the hardest part is that first step to get started, right? My strong suggestion to you is download R. I'm guessing most of you already have that. You can even get the university edition of SAS. Start programming. Get help from some of these folks in this room to say, all right, I want to start programming. What do I do? And obviously you do it on your own time, but we're pretty nice people here. We don't mind spending 5-10 minutes with you guys now and then to help you get started.